Hi, this is Steve Palladino from Palladino Power Project, bringing you another video. This time, I want to go over concepts and practical application of CP testing for runners using a case presentation. This is a case with Jaden Merrick, um, who finished his cross country season and is about to go into winter training. And we needed to update his CP. So, also because he does training in the winter, at least in part on a non motorized curved treadmill, that is going to be another featured part of this presentation. So, let me begin by going over when CP testing is important, or when you might consider doing CP testing. And there's a more detailed list. I'll put the link in the notes and description for this video for this article called Protocol for CPU Testing. It's a Google Docs, and you could go into that a little bit more, read about it a little bit more. So, um, but here is a little synopsis. These are the key points on when you might consider CP testing. The first one is when there's a change in fitness. When when you suspect there's a change in fitness, it's important to update the CP so your training targets are updated and everything is in concert with that CP test, or the updated CP estimate. How might you know if there's a change in fitness? One is perceived effort in training. If training is getting progressively easier with a given set of targets based on a given CP, then that means that CP might be getting old and your CP might have grown. So that would be a time when to test. Another way of incorporating CP testing for fitness changes by time intervals. We know that we do a block of training, and the minimum time course might be about 4 weeks, and it might be up to 8 weeks. So in that 4 to 8 week period would be good time interval. So we don't want to let CP testing or testing to go longer than about 8 weeks apart, because there could be significant gains or loss in fitness depending on what's going on the training side. So time interval or perceived effort in training would indicate possibly when CP test might be indicated. Another one would be when environmental conditions change. Um, that would be another time to update CP. So the CP is more specific to the environmental conditions. Um, that way, when you generate targets, they're generated off of a CP that's more current to the environmental conditions. Um, Another time would be when changing a run power hardware device. For example, if changing from a Stride wind pod to a Stride next gen wind pod, two different hardware devices, and just whether it's sensors or whether it's slight algorithm changes, um, there's a potential for one CP to be different on one device next to the other. Even if it's the same model, same version, like a Stride wind model versus a new Stride wind model, but it's a different piece of hardware. CP might be different. Power output or power reporting might be just different enough. And if it's 1% difference, that's not a big deal. That's not functionally significant. But if it's 2%, that could be functionally significant. So I recommend whenever changing power, run power hardware device, do a CP test. When starting to run on a non-motorized curved treadmill, this is non-motorized curved treadmill is a different animal, and your running power will be much lower for reasons other than just environmental differences between outside and the treadmill room, and other than the loss of air power. So it is really important to do CP tests on a curved treadmill if you're going to be using that. And one over that is that to properly put the CP on the non-motorized curved treadmill in relation to the outdoor running, you really should do a relatively recent outdoor CP test and follow it up with a CP test on a non-motorized curved treadmill. That's one of the primary parts of this video, and we'll go over that. Another reason for doing CP tests is to get a current CP just prior to an A race, and you want to do this in as much specificity as possible. The shoes that you're going to be racing in, as close as possible as the race conditions, the surface type, etc. You want to replicate and get as specific as possible, and do that about 10 to 21 days prior to an A race. And then another time that you do CP testing is when you're opting to use the Final Search individualized interval power target calculator. It's best to do a CP test if using that calculator and plug in the values. So there's the reasons for doing CP tests, and what we're going to focus in on is this one right here, and then also this one right here. So Jaden changed his run power hardware device, and he also is starting to run on a non-motorized curved treadmill in the winter season. So two good, important reasons to CP test now. So Jaden just finished a cross-country season. You can see here, this is his training load. These are his training load charts. And this one here is his chronic training load in TSB, chronic training load in blue, and TSB in yellow. Over here, the green line is his chronic training load CTL ramp rate. And here is intensity load. This is the load that is greater than or equal to 95% of FTP CP, and the red line is greater than or equal to 103% of FTP CP. And then these blue dots down here on each chart is a race day, a cross-country race during the cross-country season, all 5K races for Jaden. And the red dot are his test days. So Jaden had a very successful cross-country season, and it was marred by only one thing. His Stride next-gen device had some kind of failure prior to Nike cross-country regional championships, which is this dot. So let's focus in on that. And so he had a 5K race at Nike cross-country regionals, and then also running lane national championships, both 5Ks. So we had that data in there. But because he had a new device, we couldn't rely on his old CP value, and we'd have to come up with something new for running outdoors. But also, um, as I mentioned earlier, Jaden was about to also go into winter, and his part of the United States, winters can keep you from running outside on certain days, and fortunately, he has a non-motorized curved treadmill. So that it would be the other reason, because the non-motorized curved treadmill, power on that is so uniquely different than over ground. You'd have to have a CP that is established for that. Now, what I'm going to do is, my preference is not to have two CP values, one for outside and one for the non-motorized curved treadmill, but instead have a weight setting that he uses for outdoor all the time, and then one weight setting for the non-motorized curved treadmill that compensates for those differences in power due to a loss of air power, temperature differences, and just the unique differences of running on a non-motorized curved treadmill. So I do it by having two weight settings and only one CP value, which is the outdoor CP value. So all targets remain the same, the CP remains the same, but the athlete just changes their weight setting for that non-motorized curved treadmill. So again, we have 15-minute data for the multi-parameter power duration model, WKO, or if you use the Strides multi-parameter power duration model. So we've got that, but we didn't have something in the shorter duration, in the 3-minute or less duration, or ideally 2 to 3 minute duration domain. And then we didn't have anything in that middle domain between 8 and 12 minutes. So we wanted to get fill those out for the multi-parameter model, but also we wanted to get an instantaneous CP estimate by doing a formal CP test. And in Jaden's case, that formal test outdoors was on the track, and it consisted of an 800-meter time trial and a 3,200-meter time trial, with 30 minutes of recovery in between, a minimum of 30 minutes of recovery in between. And then to replicate that, we used time. So we used 3 minutes and 10 minutes to get a replication of that CP test, but on a non-motorized curved treadmill. We're not going to use distance, because distance is another thing that is distorted on a non-motorized curved treadmill. That's why I prescribe everything in terms of duration when I'm prescribing. So we had to do 2 CP tests with adequate spacing in between. In this case, we used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days in between. One of those days was a 0 day on a Sunday. So let's look at Jaden's CP testing, and eventually we're going to get to the calculations and so forth. All right, let's look at some of the details now. So the first test, CP test that I had Jaden do, was a 800-meter test and a 3,200-meter test on the track. this was necessary for a couple of reasons. One is because he had the new next gen stride device that we weren't able to get it tested until he finished his racing season. Um, so we wanted to establish a new CP with this new device, but also secondarily, we need this test to go along with the non-motorized curved treadmill CP tests so that we can actually figure out the percent difference between those CP values and correct his weight setting. So this was the first one, and he ran 201 for his 800 meters. This is solo. He wasn't paced or anything like that. Just went out to the track by himself and did a 201 for 800 meters. Now, if you notice, I have two 2 hours. 2 minutes and 4 seconds worth of data here. Here, let me scroll down. So I have 2 minutes and 4 seconds because I'm looking for the highest power segment, the longest higher power segment before it really starts dropping off. And if you look here, the shadow incorporates that segment, and so 427 watts for 2 minutes and 4 seconds. He did a run into the 800. If you're wondering, how this can happen, so he did a run in and then did a 201 800. And of course, there's a few strides afterwards before you stop. The 3200 was he ran 929, and let me show you. Here's his. This is the lap. This is the lap segment. Sorry. And this is the including the power. If you look at the shadow, you can see that if I click on the 9 minutes and 36 seconds worth of power, we're still getting a good high power. So here's the 929. It was a little bit more narrow, less of the power segment. And then watch there, it got a little bit longer, 936. Also, the power was the same. Here's 367 for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, and then here's 367 again for 936. It's because of the run in and a few steps afterwards. So I want this the longest possible for calculating true power duration and calculating CP2 the best. That's why I encourage not using laps, but instead manually select the highest power segment, the highest longest power segment, I should say. So that was a Friday. So again, he ran 427, if I remember right, and for 2 minutes and 4 seconds, and then he ran 367 for 9 minutes and 36 seconds. So that's the outdoor overground CP. I always will double check his air power as well, and his air power was pretty decent. So in other words, it wasn't zero or air power. And we have a fairly valid test here. So that was then, and then we moved forward, and we had let me see, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It on 5 days later, he did another test, CB test, and this was done on the non-motorized curved treadmill. I mentioned that when you go onto a non-motorized curved treadmill, the environment is different because the temperatures In the winter time in northern hemisphere, typically the temperature is a little bit higher, um, around 68 Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius. And the humidity, local body humidity, is much higher than even the room humidity, because unless you have some industrial sized fans, the evaporative cooling is not the same, and you got a lot of local humidity, you got a lot of water content, sweat on your body, so there's a higher humidity, and so I usually use at least 75% relative humidity for treadmill reasons. Um, so there's that, the environmental differences, but also you don't have air power. So, for example, here's a 3-minute test. We scroll down, no air power. This usually has a long list of all the total power, air power, PRC, etc. So no air power on a treadmill. That's just the way the stride device records and functions. So there's that. And then finally, on a non-motorized curved treadmill, power is always much lower than even those two factors would suggest. So you have to do it on treadmill CP test. So 5 days later, and most of the running in between was just short, easy running, because he's aside from these tests, he's on a break from between cross country and then his track season build. So the prescription was 3 minutes and 10 minutes. So here's a 3-minute test, shaded out. And the reason it's time-based and not distance-based, because distance calibration is also off on a non-motorized curved treadmill. So I usually prescribe everything in duration. So the distance calibration doesn't mean anything, right, if it's off. But it's also important to realize I couldn't prescribe an 800 meter and 3,200 meter, because 800 meters would be a longer test, and the 3,200 meter would be a longer test, and the lower power, etc. So I did it by time, using 3 minutes and 10 minutes as relatively close to what the other tests would provide. So you have similar durations for composing your protocol. So in this test, the 3-minute test, he averaged 343 watts for 3 minutes. And then on the 10-minute test, this is after at least the 30-minute rest. So that's one thing when you're doing a same day, same session protocol for CP testing, is you want to have at least 30 minutes, not less than 30 minutes. It could be more. If you want 40 minutes, and that's what it takes to feel recovered and good to go, that's what you take. So this is his 10-minute test here, and 318 watts for 10 minutes. All right, so next what we do is we're going to take those and calculate the resultant critical power and reserve work capacity, or W prime. So I'll take the values from the average power from the CP test segments, and I'll come over to final surge and use the calculators, the free calculators that are available. This is in the beta view on the calendar, final surge calendar. On the far right, there's the calculator icon. Click on it. You'll come up with workout calculators. Click on Palladino. You'll have all the different free calculators that I've created for this. Just scroll down and you have the one for calculating CP and reverse reserve work capacity from a CP test. and you enter the values. Now, I'll stop here and say that there are other alternatives. You can use the Superpower calculator that is Google Sheets based, so that's the Sheets based. And there's also a Superpower calculator that is web based. They're both pretty easy to use for this particular function. I've created other videos for that. In the description of this video, I'll put a link for how to get to all three of these, and it'll be called calculating CP after a CP test or something of that nature. So what I did here is I went to the calculator, I plugged in the numbers from the first track overground outside test here, 427 watts for 2 minutes and 4 seconds, 367 watts for 936. Click that button, estimate results, and here's what we got. 350.5 watt is the CP estimate, and 9.48 is the reserve work capacity, or W prime estimate. That's about right for him. So it more or less confirms a pretty valid CP test for him. So this is his outside overground CP estimate. So then what I did is I came over and did the same exact thing for the non-motorized curved treadmill. And you can see those numbers that I just copied over from the test. And it resulted in a 307.3 watt CP with a reserve work capacity of 6.43. That's low, but that's not unexpected when you lose air power and you're not generating as much speed. So this does not surprise me. So bottom line is we have 350.5 versus 307.3 watts on non-motorized curved treadmill. Now, I could stop there and just say, okay, well, we're gonna use this 350 watts for outside, and we will use 307 watts for on the non-motorized curved treadmill. But that means keeping two sets of CP values, which, for working with targets, they're going to change depending on, it snowed that day, so now he's going on this, and there's two sets of targets. There's going to be an outdoor target and a treadmill target, and you just pick the targets that you want. Or the other issue of keeping two CPs is that your training load, to calculate your training load, your TSS or RSS, you're going to have to change your CP setting each time you change your venue, and to me it doesn't work well that way. So what I do is I have the athlete just simply change the weight setting based on the percentage difference. And so in this case, he'd need a higher weight setting than his 140 pounds that he uses for outside. So this is outside, 140 pounds. 307 watts, he's going to need a higher weight setting so he can generate the same relative number to 350 watts. All right, so we keep one CP, but two weight settings. So you can't only use 350.5 versus 307.3 to do the calculation for the percent difference and apply it to the weight setting. You can't do that because you also have to consider the environmental conditions differences. So for example, this test, the indoor curve treadmill test, was done at about 68F 20C and about 75%, maybe a little higher relative humidity local to the body. But this test, the outdoor test right here, was done in 47F, so lower temperature, 74% relative humidity. So not too dissimilar, but we have to correct this 350 to the environmental conditions of the treadmill, so we get a true apples to apples comparison for the calculated difference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 350.5 that he did outside in 47 Fahrenheit or 8.3 Celsius, and use that value to estimate what it would be in the same conditions as the treadmill. This is my own personal calculator using the Stride algorithm for converting temperature, humidity, and altitude. The same calculator is contained within the Superpower calculator. So you can go to the Superpower calculator Sheets version, select the appropriate conversion calendar or calculator, and input the numbers sort of the same way as what I'm doing here. So what I'm doing is keeping the altitude the same. We're converting from his outside to what the inside conditions were, about 68F 20C, and outside humidity to inside humidity. So 350.5 becomes about 345 watts in the same conditions. So now what we're going to do is that's the basis for calculating the weight setting change. So this is 345 versus 307, 307, and let's do those calculations. So we're going to go 307 divided by 345, and we get about 11%. 89%, 307 is 89% of 345. There's about 11% difference. So we're going to multiply his outdoor weight, which is 140 pounds, times 1.11 to capture that 11%. And his treadmill weight for his non-motorized curved treadmill is 155. All prescriptions are going to be based on 350.5. That's going to be his CP value that he uses for outdoor and for his non-motorized curved treadmill. But when he's running outside, he's going to use 140-pound weight setting, and when he's running on the non-motorized curved treadmill, it's going to be 155 pounds. So note that it's 11% is that difference. When Jaden first started, he was younger, lighter, and didn't have as high of a CP value in watts per kilogram. The differential was about 24%, I think was the first time that I calculated for him. But over time, it dropped. Each year it dropped a little bit, 16%. Then it was down to about 11%, 10 or 11% last year. So the point I'm going to make is you can't assume a standardized conversion factor and just do it without doing the testing. If you have a non-motorized curved treadmill, you can't just apply 25% or 30% or 33%, whatever. That's a shortcut. It'll get you in the ballpark, but it's not going to necessarily be truly accurate. And the only way to do it is to do an outdoor test, an indoor test, and then follow this sort of procedure that I did where we convert the outdoor tests to indoor temperatures to get that CP, and then divide or figure out the percent difference between the two CP values, and then assign that to the weight settings. So hopefully this was helpful for you. It's a pretty good illustrative case for when to test. There's a couple of reasons why we chose to test at this point in time and when we did it, and then also the issues, the concepts applied to outdoor versus non-motorized curved treadmill. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.